after the talk by Anna Hidalgo-Simon. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my great pleasure to call upon esteemed Dr. Anna Hidalgo-Simon from Leiden University Medical Center and the Renew Consortium. Her presentation is titled Regulators and HTA Bodies as Co-Designers and of Clinical Trials, Aligning Evidence Generation for Meaningful Patient Access. She will discuss how regulators and HTA bodies are becoming increasingly involved in shaping clinical trial design itself. Doctor, we are looking forward to your presentation. The mic is yours. Thank you very much.
Thank you. First, thanks to the invitations. This is a really nice meeting in a fantastic town, so I'm very happy to be here. I'm going to use the disclaimer just to remind you. So I spent 20 years in EMA, and one of the big advantages of moving to academia is that I'm a lot more free to see what I want. I don't need to read the lines to take. So it's my opinion. I defend the regulators with all my heart and all my brain, but sometimes I can also now say things that could work better. So I think we have a slide or a couple of questions for you before we get into the content. And the first one is actually a test because you have been giving the answer in the previous presentation. So my colleague, Dr. Ruskova, told this. So please go and put your guess. And as you know, the total number is 30. And everybody was listening. This is fantastic. Eva, just an applause to you and the clarity of your presentation. Okay. The key message here is that some new ATMPs are approved and some get out of the market. But for the last 10 years, it has consistently been between 1/3 and 1/4 which are not in the market. This is a bit of it's not just a number, it's a disaster. Those are therapies that work, they have good efficacy, they are safe, they have patients who need them, and they are just not available. So this is almost the situation that we really want to avoid. So the answer is 9, yes. The second question from the slide that is just for me to know, because this is a super room to ask this question. And I would like to take back, what do you think is the main reason why clinical trials are leaving Europe? And for ATMPs, clinical trials are coming to Europe in drips and drops. We are not the choice place to do clinical trials. And to be honest, we were thinking we are second, now we are third. Very soon we are going to be fourth. So I will collect all this information and probably address some of your concerns as we go along in the presentation. Excellent. Okay, cost and money can be together. So yeah, we are getting there. Thank you. I would like to keep this slide, please, if I can. So let's move on now to see how is the picture. And as you saw from my title, I'm really going to be between the regulators and the HTA because the focus of my efforts at the moment are access. So the situation that we have at the moment is that even after the clinical trials, which we know from today, the clinical trials are not harmonized, we would like them to be more harmonized, we have this dual situation in which we have a good part that is harmonized and another part which is not harmonized at all. And most of the money problems are all along for the clinical trials, but also for the access part. And this is because we have now two bridges. The first one is the traditional valley of death, where a lot of the products just don't make it. They stay there. It's very difficult to go to first in human. You need a lot of money. Okay, a little bit is normal attrition, the things that work or not work well. A lot of them are very good therapies who just don't pass. But then we have the second part, which is the one of the 9 products we were talking about. What is the point of going through the process, investing all the money, have all the benefits, be aware of all the pitfalls, and then not having the drug available to the patients who need them because it's not profitable? And I like to separate this problem into 2. The problem of the individual, so we need to be in the market, we need to have it reimbursed, and we need to have it integrated and prescribed by doctors. Otherwise, it's not going to get there. But then we have the international aspect, which is also very important for me, which is we just don't want the patients on the hospital that have the hospital exemption to get that. We want everybody who needs it, ideally in the world, to get it. So the problem and the main difficulty for the advanced therapies is that we have to stop thinking one step at a time. We need to consider the full path from the very beginning. And this is at the heart of the clinical trials. There are so many things that you will need at the end that you need to start producing from the beginning, that this is what you need to do. Start counting back, not from the market, not from the regulators, not from the HTA, from the patient in the bed, and come back and say, how many things that I will need to get it reimbursed can I be doing from the basic research, from the clinical trials, from the preclinical, and then from the regulators onwards. And there is a lot that can be done in here. So we go to the individuals. There are 3 main problems that I want to highlight. The unmet medical need, how you select the product, the engagement with the decision makers, not just the regulators, and how you can design your product, your manufacturing, and your clinical trial development with the end in mind. So briefly, each one of these points. The unmet medical need is super important. We know that we need to have the product in the clinic, and for that, it helps if it's something that we need. Now, I'm not going to say that products that do not have a profit, they shouldn't be developed. On the contrary, especially in orphan drugs, those are the products who are our testing grounds. They are the products who help with so many things, not just the products, the media, the companion diagnostics, the delivery methods, the biomarkers, everything is an ecosystem here. And we need a lot of push for these drugs because we are all learning and all benefiting at the end. For example, Strimbelis is not profitable. It's in the market. Thank you to Teleton. I'm looking forward to your presentation later on. But if Strimbelis were started now, maybe it will not have made it to the market. Because if you start now with something which is so clearly non-profit and so expensive to make, you just don't get the partnership together. Plus, this unmet medical need will give you priority and help from the regulators, from the HTA, from everybody. These are the ones that we want. We want things that work and we need it. No nice to have and not additional ones. The regulators will approve you if you have a positive benefit risk. They don't care if the positive is this big or this big. If you have a positive benefit risk in at least one group of patients, you should get a marketing authorization. For the reimbursement, no. 2 different decisions. They don't have identical data because the HTAs look a lot more data, but they will all look at everything that you do from day 0 in the lab. Do you know about the joint clinical assessment? This is relatively new, started in January 2025 for ATMPs. This is good. So we are not reinventing the wheel in every country, but this is not the money decisions. This is just the clinical assessment. And this is to avoid the situation that we had until recently, like Germany says clear benefit, France says is limited benefit, the Netherlands says it's not enough evidence to see if it's beneficial. At least that part now is unified. So little by little, we are getting there. The key decision, which is this going to be paid or reimbursed, is still taken locally, nationally, sometimes regionally, and sometimes hospital. So you can have a combined scientific advice, and this is a very good thing to do. It's a bit difficult. You need to qualify for it. It's very beneficial, but this doesn't mean that the advice is going to be coordinated. This means that it's going to be at the same time. They are not going to talk to each other to give you summarized advice. They're going to tell you what they all think at the same time, but this is very important and a step forward. First, when you ask people to give opinion at the same time and they see each other's opinion, they start the harmonization because they can question if what they're asking makes sense with what other people make sense. And the second important part is that the earlier you know what everybody wants, the earlier you can decide what is really key and what is nice to have. So the challenges in clinical development for ATMPs, you will be very familiar with this. The materials are very short. You cannot spend a lot of your cells doing testing and doing release for the pharmacovigilance expert here and there. The conventional PK and PD do not work. You need to be more inventive. The animal models are so-so. For sometimes they are not relevant. Other times they are. You cannot have volunteers. Recruiting sufficient patients is very difficult in orphan drugs, especially when they are spread all over the continent, 2 here, 3 there. And you cannot do the traditional development. So the summary of this is the subtitle: classical development is not expected. And when you look at the summary of the products, those are all ATMPs approved. And if you think a little bit and you see where they are talking about the single arm, the parallel arms, single arms, you know, how many numbers, small centers, dual center, you can tell that this is not a normal development, and forget about large numbers, and the comparisons are different. For a lot of studies, you need a good natural history. We will go back to the real world evidence need. And then you also need to consider that global developments are not that smooth. This slide mainly looks at the difference between the FDA and EMA. But here we know that we need to go to more than one market. And you may find that the example that I like more is about the non-clinical conditions for the living of the animals. So when you go to a CRO who does international work, they have the American room and the European room. And if I was a rat, I want to be in the European room because apparently they have more water, more space per cage, and better temperature control. But the fact is that you can produce the data, expect that this data is going to work everywhere, and it's not. So you better know it from the beginning. And then the post-authorization, that maybe you should say, where are we talking about post-authorization in the clinical trials setting, is super important. When you go with an ATMP and you already have a plan of what you are going to do after the authorization, follow up, number of centers, the science of the studies, you already have half of the work done because the regulators really do care. You may not have all the data, you can't. The uncertainty before you approve these products is enormous. But if you already have a plan of address and you have all the ducks in a row of where and how you are going to collect the data, you are advancing enormously. And also, all these registries based on real world and evidence, you will need that to locate your patients, to have the right strategy, to connect with the right centers, and to put your clinical trials in a much better footing. So we go now to the international part. This is a study that I did as part of IDRIX. You may know it, the International Rare Disease Research Consortium. And we did something quite original. We took all the orphan drugs, not only ATP, orphans in general, approved in 2021 and 2022, and we say, okay, approved in 1 out of 6, FDA, Europe, Canada, Saudi Arabia, Swissmedic, and Australia, and Brazil. Swissmedic out, Australia and Brazil were in. You have 6, and you're going to say, okay, if you have a rare disease approved in one of them, how long into you get it approved into somewhere else? It goes from 6 months to 10 years. And the average is 3. So a drug that you have enough evidence to get it approved in one place should be almost, scream for everywhere else. And still it takes 3 years. And there are many reasons for that. But one reason that you're thinking about is not different evidence. 70% of these drugs, even years apart, were approved with the same clinical trials in the same place. And the second important takeaway for me is that the location of the clinical trials is less and less important for orphan diseases. So we used to say all these like genetically relevant data, that is really moving away now. We want the quality of the clinical trial rather than where the clinical trial was done. So this is a communal responsibility here. Regulators will be happy to talk to you if you have a good approval with good data somewhere else. But they also need you to knock at the door, because regulators don't go to say, present it to me. You need to go and say to the regulators, we want to do that. So doing good clinical trials and then trying to reach as many patients as possible in the world is the way to go. So my favorite solutions of how this is going to improve in the next few years: the regulatory alignment, automation, artificial intelligence, and the real-world evidence and data. So there has been an explosion of things that the regulators want to do with each other. They are all slightly different group of countries, different aims, different ways to do things. You know, sometimes they just get together to share the information, and other times is to have mutual recognition. Other times is for special products to give them priority together. So this is as complete list as you can get, but more of them will be coming. There are pilots, there are an initiative. Is super important for the developers if they can get in one of these, because their learning experience is enormous. And you are also helping the regulators to learn and to come with you in that fast trend that Regina saw us go in the innovation much faster than the regulations. There are also a lot of other, like INRA, the WHO, the guidelines of ISSCR, and a lot of these areas are around NTMPs, but not only. And one thing that I would like to do is that the fact that you are in one of these preferential pilot schemes doesn't mean that things are going to go faster. I like this example from Orbis, because what you are doing is everybody is faster when they are in the pilot, in the scheme, but everybody has a different timetable. So this is not the solution for harmonization. This is help with convergence, which is we agree mostly on the science. Let's see if we can converge as much as possible with the decision-making and the regulatory process. And also, every regulator almost now has an expeditive pathway. So if you have an ATMP, try to get yourself into this faster process. Faster is relative, because still it takes you an ATMP to get a marketing authorization a year minimum, probably more, sometimes 9 months, but it's long. But if you are in one of these expedite process, you get a lot more help from the regulator. So even if you don't go faster, you go smoother, or you get there in a better condition, with a better indication, with more smooth landing than to get into the health system. So everybody has, then again, slightly different flavors, but very good things to get into. And then automation goes more, for me, and AI, for the manufacturing part. So ATMP's manufacturing is highly mechanical. You go hand by hand. There is a lot of steps. It's very complicated. The more than you can do in a standardized automatic way, the more you are lowering that uncertainty and the variability and the batch-to-batch changes. It is a very difficult thing to do, but it's coming right left and center, especially in China. They are developing an enormous amount of these machines where you can have sections of the process in an automated way. Artificial intelligence, again, should make things not just smoother, but also cheaper. And there is many ways that you can do that, from identification of the right patients before you start the clinical trials, to the centers, to what are the part of things that you can do centrally versus the things that need to be done in the hospital where you go, to later on, how you're going to deal with all this enormous amount of data who are going to be produced during and after organization. And then you are going to do the real-world evidence. Again, key from every stage of the process. And the impact is enormous, because you are also helping a lot the payers with good real-world evidence. So the regulators are starting to do. We have the initiative of EMA-FDA, and then you have the published review of the studies. Regulators always go behind. You cannot anticipate and put the guidance before knowing what is being done out there. So yes, asking for guidance is very good, but you also need to fit the guidance. And these are my final thoughts. So clinical trials began with the control evidence, but the mind should be to deliver access. And this access starts with the individual patients, but should also have in mind that we have many patients and we want to reach them all. Thank you.